The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Wednesday, February 26, 2025, and it is the midweek edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I'm Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We've got just a few smaller news items today and what would be considered a big news item, but it's going to be more speculation than anything else at this point, as we are one day away from the Pokemon Presents on Pokemon Day. And we'll just go through a few of the rumors that we've seen online that of things that may happen coming up tomorrow. So, and then, of course, on Friday, we will review the best of what came out of Pokemon Day when that happens tomorrow. Joining me in studio, as always, on this Wednesday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. I'm excited to be halfway through the week. It always seems like these big announcements and events happen right after we go live and have things to talk about. So, unfortunately, the best we can do is speculate about Pokemon Day. I feel like I'm setting myself up for disappointment, but also, who knows? Maybe I could be positively surprised. Maybe they do something crazy, like announce Generation 10. I don't know, but anxious to find out and anxious to get into the news today.
Yeah, it's not a huge news day. For some reason, my chat decided to post my chat message after. Like, I don't know what happened there. Like, it pasted in Discord and then it put the link before it. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But, yeah, it's kind of difficult when these events happen. Usually they happen the same day we record, just later in the day, and then we have to kind of double back. But at least in this case, it's kind of the in-between day. So I think that kind of gives us time to talk about it over 2 days, where, today we're going to try to speculate on exactly what we think is going to happen, or what the experts, the so-called experts, think is going to happen. And then we can come back on Friday and really kind of recap and see, is it going to be disappointing? Is it going to be, there are going to be some really cool stuff that's going to be announced there. I think we'll kind of have a better idea of that coming up tomorrow. But as we jump into that first story, and it really, like I said, it really isn't a story as much as it is just kind of educated guessing at this point, is, of course, Pokemon Day coming up tomorrow. And really, this is an interestingly timed one, because we all know and have talked about extensively on this podcast that Nintendo has a very large direct at the beginning of April, where they're going to give, presumably, everything we're going to need to know about the Switch 2, the release date, possibly some new titles that'll be coming out. So this, on the one hand, could feel like some afterthought to some Nintendo fans. Maybe if you're not really diehard into Pokemon, this kind of feels like just a little small appetizer for the main course that's coming in April. But there are so many people that are diehard about Pokemon that are going to have high expectations for what they're going to get tomorrow. And we've heard rumors really all over the board. And, this Game Rant story was kind of the first thing I saw a couple days ago, where there was a rumored multiplayer game. Of course, there was a leak a while back that kind of gave mostly code names for things that were potentially coming down the road. There were just glimpses of information. It wasn't anything concrete by any stretch, but it'll be interesting to see, what of that ends up coming out tomorrow, because I have a feeling we're going to see some of the stuff that leaked out. But I guess as someone who, has played Pokemon, pretty much since the very first gen, what are you looking forward to? What do you hope to see tomorrow?
Yeah, I definitely go as far back as Red and Blue back in the day. I did drop off for quite a while, but I think that's probably true with a lot of people.
Yeah.
That being said, you kind of look back to last year's Pokemon Direct, as far Pokemon Day, where we had the first announcement of Pokemon Legends ZA, which is supposed to be coming in 2025. They had announced Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, which has been a pretty big hit, I believe. Which I do have that on my phone. I don't use it any more than just the occasional pull it open and rip open a fake pack of cards. That's really about the extent of the excitement there for me. But and then, of course, the updates to all their existing live service games that are going on, whether it's Unite or Go or what is the Cafe game, which doesn't really interest me at all, but it's out there. They mentioned leaks that kind of happened late last year that mentioned a Pokemon Synapse code name. suggesting that it's kind of a multiplayer battle focused game. Might have some similarities to Splatoon. Uh, Another leak had suggested that players would be using ride Pokemon and using them to fight Pokemon and other players. So we'll see what that is. That could be interesting. It would be kind of wild if it was similar to Splatoon, simply because obviously we're now a year or so removed from Pal World hitting and becoming a big deal, and now Nintendo actually going after Pocket Pair and the Pal World team for stealing some of their trademarked or licensed IP. Other things I think we might end up seeing is more info on Legends ZA. I'd like to see some gameplay there, maybe, and an actual concrete release date. That game takes place in the Kalos region, which is where Pokemon and XY happened. Kind of like Legends Arceus, it's a past version of that city. They did confirm that Mega Evolution would be in that game. And then you have some of the kind of far-fetched rumors. There are people talking about a physical collection of the first 3 generation of Pokemon games coming out. I seriously doubt that's going to happen, just because why now? Like, you could have done this for years and you didn't. It just, I could see them probably more likely slowly releasing them on their online subscription service and going that route. I mean, they did have, I think, on 3DS and DS where you could, from their store, get digital copies of the games, but nothing really beyond that. So I don't foresee them doing it. I hope they do. I think that'd be really cool, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. Otherwise, we might get an announcement of another remake or a Let's Go style remake, hopefully of the 2nd generation. I think that would be really, really well received. But yeah, a lot of speculation. It'll be interesting to see what comes true, what surprises us in a good way, and what doesn't really hit at all.
Yeah, you mentioned the potential re-releases of physical games. I just wonder, because we just did a story either Monday or at the end of last week talking about how they've got these new OLED bundles for the Switch, where they're clearly still trying to move Switch 1s before Switch 2 comes out. Could this potentially be an opportunity to sell a few more Switches? Like, hey, we're going to do this bundle with the physical, first 3 generations of Pokemon, where, it'll give us another chance to get more of the backstock out and maybe get people who, like you said, have lapsed from the franchise kind of energized about it again.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I also think when it comes to both Pokemon ZA and then if they do announce a Generation 10, there's really no reason that those both couldn't still be Switch 1 games just in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Scarlet and Violet and kind of how poorly it performed on current generation Switch. I'm anxious to see how it plays on Switch 2, and I think given just the amount of units they've sold of the first Switch, I could see where maybe they would be hesitant to throw that on a Switch 2, thinking that, a lot of families will have their kids playing Pokemon, maybe aren't super excited about just immediately jumping into a Switch 2, more expensive console, and just letting their kids run around like crazy with it. It's hard to say, but yeah, certainly with them, anything's possible, and whatever they decide is bound to make a lot of money.
Yeah, and Screen Rant's got a really good kind of top 10 possible rumors mention, more trading card upgrades, new trading cards, maybe even new Pokemon potentially, some other sequels to things that have been released already. So go check that out. It kind of gives you a rundown of what we might see, but it should be interesting. Nintendo's been doing some great things, and Pokemon Day, and it's always been something that has been pretty newsworthy. I mean, to varying degrees over the years, but it kind of feels like Pokemon is as strong now as it's ever been. And, we just did the story a couple weeks ago about them doing this, collaboration with Major League Baseball, and they're going to be doing Pokemon Go events at Major League Baseball ballparks across the nation. And I'll be interested to see if maybe we get news of more collaborations like that. I mean, we're going to talk in the Empire Express about another One Piece collaboration. Yeah. Maybe this is a direction that these companies are going. Like, hey, let's, sports are popular here. Let's maybe do a Pokemon Go with the NHL or Pokemon Go with the NBA and see if we can tie more of these together and make it a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I think if you're someone who maybe has dropped off of Pokemon or have never really been into it from the beginning, it's worth a watch just to gain an understanding of just the scope and the size of the Pokemon franchise. Like, it's truly staggering. And some of the announcements you're going to see, you're going to be like, wow, I didn't know that was a thing, or that was a thing. You know, will there be a new live action movie? What are they doing with the anime? Will there be fashion collaborations? Because that kind of thing seems to be a big deal now. I know, like, Final Fantasy 14 has some big collaboration with some designer, and I just their hands are in so many different realms. It's just wild to see when you consider kind of the humble beginnings they had back in the mid to late 90s.
It almost feels like it's its own mega company alongside Nintendo. It's like, yeah, it is under Nintendo, but it almost feels like two giants kind of working together. But we'll certainly have the news on Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time with the Friday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. We'll tell you everything that happened from Pokemon Day, and we'll tell you what we think of it. So it should be interesting to see what kind of news comes out of that on Thursday when that event breaks. Let's jump into another news story, just some smaller stuff here, kind of from here on out. And NXT, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, they were in Cincinnati last night, and it was another huge event at the Andrew J. Brady Music Center. Obviously we can get into some of the results specifically, but just kind of the feel of NXT when you see, the crowd reactions, when you see some of the things they're doing. I'm not sure, even in the black and gold era, and people will always be fond of that, so it's almost blasphemous to say this era might be better, but this era feels like it has the perfect balance between the people who can really go in the ring and the characters that are going to allow them to get over on a large scale on the main roster, and it's impressive what the staff there has done. You got to watch NXT. I only got to see the highlights, but your general impressions, anything that really stood out from that episode last night?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you mentioned the crowd, and they were on fire all night, even to the point where watching it on television was annoying because how many times they had to bleep the crowd. But yeah, I think one of the big differences right now with NXT compared to the black and gold era is that it doesn't feel like it exists in a vacuum. It's like you have the collaboration with TNA. You know that there's going to be main roster support for the characters you're creating. They're not just going to move up and become something totally different and peter out and die. And I think in the black and gold era, there was that one little glimpse of hope that quickly died. But for the most part, you were watching it thinking, this is great, but... And I don't think you feel that way anymore. I would also argue that the people who are on the top now are better equipped for success on Raw and SmackDown because I think you have a crop of stars who, on average, have better charisma and better characters than what you saw in Black and Gold. The show last night was incredible. I think all the in-ring action was above average at the least. Carmen Petrovic and Stephanie Vaquer, great match to open it up. Like, Vaquer's always impressive, but I think Carmen really looked good in that match last night. I haven't watched Moose wrestle in quite a while, but he and Lexis King both put on a tremendous match and both really impressed me. The pop for the Hardys was amazing and well-deserved. I think, notwithstanding kind of the way Jeff left the company last time, I think it kind of shows, for one, just how willing WWE is to say, hey, we get it, but we still want to work with you guys in some capacity.
And they even dropped new merch yesterday.
Yeah. So. Undoubtedly one of the greatest tag teams of all time and a team that existed in an era that people will always look back on fondly.
Mm-hmm.
So great to see them back in there, and who knows, maybe we'll get one more run out of those guys. As far as kind of the rest of the show goes, you had Trick Williams teasing a heel turn, which I think might help just because you're bringing in some new baby faces. His character feels like it doesn't have a whole lot going on anymore. The Eddie Thorpe feud's fine and all, but I feel like if nothing else, it might be a vehicle to give you a more ruthless, darker Trick Williams, which I'm totally in favor of.
Yeah.
Then Ricky Saints looked fine in his debut. I think They did a great job pairing him with Javon Evans, and I really like the pairing of Ethan Page and Wes Lee. So we'll see where we go, but NXT's always just so solid.
Yeah, it's really just a great program. We had a lot of things teased, potential title versus title on the women's side with Vaquera and Julia. We were going to get Fraxium taking on the Hardys for the TNA titles at Roadblock. We're going to get Obafemi and Moose coming up for the NXT title. There's just so much stuff going on and so much stuff being booked ahead, and you're seeing them get out on the road and do these shows, in Cincinnati with a smaller crowd, but a very loud, engaged crowd that clearly came to be entertained. And I think that is the reward, even more so than Raw and SmackDown, and certainly more than AEW at this point. These crowds are rewarding NXT for just kind of making it through the crap that was 2.0 and coming out the other side and putting on a weekly program that is always entertaining. Some of it might not be great, but they're always doing something entertaining, trying new things, and it makes it the easiest 2-hour watch on television each and every week.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we'll always kind of malign 2.0, and justifiably so, but I think there are still like small elements of that survive to this current era where you look at some of the backstage segments and certainly some of the characters, and it still kind of has that like, hey, we all go to high school together and we wrestle thing, which I think they've managed to make that work somehow. But 2.0 was like the overcorrection that sees your car in a ditch. Like clearly they needed to I don't want to say WWE-ify, but to some degree, yeah, like what the Black and Gold was doing, because I think even though we kind of know why a lot of the Black and Gold people didn't pan out, I think there was maybe an overemphasis on just the in-ring work at that point in time and not so much the character work. And I think what we have now is truly kind of the best of both.
It wanted to be the classic Ring of Honor. Is basically what it wanted to be, and did. Like there was most of those guys that were in the golden era, if you will, of Ring of Honor before it died. R.I.P. Ring of Honor. But yeah, that's not sustainable for what WWE is. If you're going to go and be successful, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having guys and gals come up that are great in the ring, like, because you do get to put on great matches in this era. It doesn't happen every week with every person, but they do have those. We saw with the women's tag team title match at the end of Raw. It's like those four busted their butt and put on an amazing match.
Yeah.
And it's like, they can do that. Like, it's good to have that in your back pocket, but it's the character work that makes the people care about the big match you have at the end of that. That makes that match main event Raw instead of opening Raw, when people maybe don't care so much about it.
Well, that's just it. You think back to the Black and Gold era. Yeah, the matches are great, but if you didn't care about the individuals doing it, it doesn't matter a whole lot. Like when I think back to my memories of Black and Gold, it's Ciampa betraying Gargano. It's that first appearance of Undisputed Era when they beat down McIntyre.
Yeah.
Like it's stuff like that. It was still kind of the story elements that made me care about the matches, but ultimately the things that I remember to this day.
Yeah, but NXT's on a roll right now. Hope they have a good rating this week because, like I said, I really feel like it was an excellent episode from beginning to end. Going to jump to kind of an evergreen story that I've been saving for a couple weeks for a day where maybe news was a little on the light side. That's kind of what you have to do sometimes in the podcasting business. But a story from CBR, Japan revealing its top heartwarming anime that made you cry in a new survey. And admittedly, this isn't necessarily your favorite type of anime. I don't know if anybody says that this is their favorite type of anime.
If it is, you probably need to seek help.
Possibly.
Like, why would you want to put yourself through that?
I would say that I probably will watch these shows maybe on a little higher frequency. Now, having said that, as we look at this list, which is on the screen now, and we'll run down it for those who are listening audio only, there are definitely more of these shows on the list, I think, than you thought you were going to be able to say, hey, I've seen that show. It's a pretty good list of shows. Let's run down them real quick. Number 10 is The Promised Neverland. Number 9 is Steins Gate. Number 8 is World End. What do you do at the end of the world? Are you busy? Will you save us? Number 7 is Silent Voice. Number 6 is Anohana. Number 5, A Place Further Than the Universe. Number 4 is Angel Beats. Number 3, Clannad After Story. Number 2, Your Lie in April. And number 1 is Violet Evergarden. Thoughts on this list? Because I think you were a little surprised to see more than a couple shows that you had watched on here.
Yeah, considering I don't go out of my way to watch anything that I think there's even the remotest possibility of being sad while I watch. I'm surprised. That being said, I think if you came up with any kind of top 10 list of anything, 3 out of 10 is probably about where I'm sitting as far as I mean, I watch what seems, I mean, if you look at my 2024 watch history, I probably watch more mid shows than I do critically acclaimed
Yeah.
shows. So the fact that I landed with 3 out of 10, those 3 being Steins Gate, World End, and Angel Beats, I can live with that. I think those shows, certainly Steins Gate, holds up as just a great show, whether you cried during it or not.
Yeah. I will say I think there's one show that we both watched that maybe was snubbed from this list, and that was Chrono Crusade.
Yeah,
That
that feels like it maybe was just released in a forgotten
Yeah.
era of anime.
Chrono Crusade was great, and it's definitely would qualify for this list. I won't give any spoilers away, but you should go out and watch it. It's got a great ADV dub on it from back in the day. It's just a really, really good story, but it should be on this list somewhere.
I mean, I think at first you'll cry because it has no relevance or connection to Chrono Trigger.
Yes.
I think once you find that out, already you're a little disappointed. It ends up being more about demons and exorcists, and it's still sad, but not
Sure.
not a whole lot of time travel going on.
For me on this list, I've seen Clannad After Story. That show broke me. I still remember one of our former tennis players. I gave her this anime because she was an anime fan, and she just sent me a message back like, "Why did you do that to me?" Because somebody else had to. It's an amazing show that is equal parts funny and charming as well. Which is, again, you talk about story. How do you make something really sad? You have to make the characters really fun and really enjoyable. You have to care about the characters for when you do bad things to them later. It adds the impact. Angel Beats is a similar story. I have seen the first 2 episodes of Anohana. Anohana is the only one on this list that I've seen that I cried in the first episode that I watched. That's why I haven't gone back and finished it, but I do need to because it's kind of critically acclaimed. World End was kind of out of nowhere because I really didn't think that was going to be a sad show at the end, and that one took a left turn, and I was bummed because I really enjoyed everything about the show up until the end of it.
Yeah, it was one of those shows that you would have liked to have seen more of it, but man, the way they ended it, you're just like, yeah, they're probably not revisiting this.
No, which is a shame because I like the characters. I thought the dub was great. Like the world was really cool. Like I feel like they missed an opportunity to do 3 or 4 seasons of that. Like so many of these other light novel shows, like you're leaving money behind by doing this. But Steins Gate obviously is an all-time classic. But yeah, I don't know. Mentioned in the chat, Silent Voice. That's one that I know is definitely earns its place on this list. But really good stuff. Violet Evergarden's one I would like to check out. Your Lie in April as well. So.
Now that I know that it's on this list, I probably won't watch it.
Possibly. Maybe it doesn't jump to the top of your queue after seeing this list.
It's got a good open.
It does, for sure. So does Your Lie in April. So does Clannad. So does Angel Beats. Like, evidently, it's like, we're going to have this really sad show. We need to bring in Lisa, or we need to bring in, World End used Scarborough Fair as the open to the show, like a cover of that. So Steins Gate, obviously great. The Promised Neverland, a really good open. So.
What would be interesting is if
Anohana.
they could create a list similar to this, where it's like shows that are similar to these shows but aren't tearjerkers, but still kind of hit the same notes. I think I would probably be more inclined to go after something like that.
Sure. Or maybe they look like they're going to be sad, but they have a happy ending and everybody lives happily ever after. Like, something like that. But, just if you're into that type of show, or maybe you just need to balance out your light novel, romantic comedies, here's a list of really good shows that might be a little bit on the sad side. Finally, one more story, and this one, kind of borrowing this from our music episode because we were kind of short on stories, but this is always worth talking about. The lineup for Rocklahoma has been announced August 29th through the 31st in Pryor, Oklahoma. Always a big event, and I think you look at the list of bands, and certainly there's a lot of big hitters on there. The headline mentioning Shinedown, Five Finger Death Punch, Breaking Benjamin, 3 Days Grace as headliners. We're going to get first-time appearances by Marilyn Manson, Alice Cooper, Bruce Dickinson, 311, Knock Loose, Tom Morello, Marky Ramone, Orianthe, and Waves in April. So, obviously, we talked a little bit about it before we went on the air today, but Rocklahoma always seems to come through with just a really outstanding lineup, not just of headlining type bands, but also kind of the secondary bands that maybe more speak to the type of music we enjoy, maybe a little bit more than the secondary bands at Sonic Temple, for example.
Yeah, I don't follow Rocklahoma typically, but I was kind of under the impression that initially they were more of kind of a classic rock thing and weren't as much into like the top tier current maybe not super current but not too far removed acts, but yeah, kind of comparing it to Sonic Temple, it's definitely not at that same scope, I don't think, but I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Shinedown at some point. 3 Days Grace, Breaking Benjamin. Looking through the list of the acts that they've announced to this point, I wouldn't mind seeing Manson just to say I did it.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of on that same level as people like Alice Cooper and Bruce Dickinson, where you just want to check them off the list if nothing else. Kind of wild to see Trickster there. I think that would be kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
As well as The Darkness and Mike Tramp's White Lion. I kind of like that you do have some of those 80s and early 90s acts that I think Sonic Temple maybe didn't lean into as much. But, yeah, I'm just kind of trying to figure out why they don't just change the name of Oklahoma to Rocklahoma, because that would be a so much better name for the state.
For sure. It makes me a little sad for Mike Tramp's White Lion that it's like 4 spots below Van Halen.
Yeah.
It's like clearly it's a tribute band, and Mike Tramp's White Lion comes in a couple spots below them. But yeah, I mean, I really do feel like they're, you hate to use the cliche something for everyone, but this really feels like if you're into this, type of music, like you said, maybe a little bit more on the hard rock side and a little less on like the metalcore type side. I feel like this lineup maybe lines up a little better with your interest than the Sonic Temple lineup, but not to say Sonic Temple's lineup isn't amazing, because it is. We've talked about it, but this is a if I was a little closer, if I had the time, it's kind of a maybe not a great time of the year for me to get down there, but this is an event I would love to take in, because I feel like every year they put together a really solid lineup.
And it looks like I'm correct about my assertion about what this concert used to be, this festival. If you look back to 2008, headliner for July 10th in 2008 was Bret Michaels. Then we have LA Gun, Enough's Enough, House of Lords. The next day, Armored Saint, XYZ, Kingdom Come, Night Ranger, Triumph, Extreme.
Wow, can I get a time machine and get back?
Yeah, that would have been a pretty great show. You had the next day, Warrant, Kicks, Black and Blue, Pretty Boy Floyd, Trickster. Yeah, so, yeah, that was kind of where they started, is one of those kind of, and I know that there were several of those festivals back then that were really kind of cashing in on that renewed interest in kind of the classic 80s hard rock metal sound. Like M3 did it as well. I think there's a market for that when you get a lot of those bands together, that's a lot more enticing than maybe seeing them individually.
Yeah, for sure. I think anytime you get a lot of those groups together, I think certainly a little more bang for your buck if you're interested in checking those groups out. But check out Rocklahoma if you're in the area. Certainly will be another really great show coming up. Ready to wrap this thing up with the Empire Express.
Let's do it.
All right, as expected, The Rock's appearance on SmackDown was a big draw, according to WrestleNomics. Friday's episode averaged 1.736 million viewers, a 22% rise over the previous week, and a larger audience than the last episode on Fox. This is why Dwayne gets to do what he wants, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, WWE is a company that's built on characters and stars, and I don't know if there's a bigger one at this point than The Rock. At the very least, I know he can't wreck what he potentially wrecked last year.
For sure.
I'm more interested in where they go with this, because I think there could be some fun character work for Cody in the future if they don't completely blow it. The next One Piece American sports collaboration happens on Friday when they have a crossover event with the Los Angeles Lakers. Lakers host the Crosstown Clippers on One Piece game night. Where does Monkey D. Luffy show up next?
I mean, hockey, maybe. I don't know. Like, are we going to get him, at a Cincinnati Bengals game potentially?
Yes.
Like, why not? Like, These are fun and they're harmless. And obviously, the Lakers aren't having any trouble drawing fans because they're really good this year. And LeBron James is evidently immortal or a vampire or something. He just gets better every year. But just kind of a cool event for anime fans out in LA who want to check out the Lakers-Clippers game coming up this week. Social media account for the anime Rising of the Shield Hero announced the 4th season of the show will debut in July of this year. Are you excited for more Shield Hero?
I think I am. I've said before that I felt like the show peaked in the first season, but I've enjoyed everything since. I'm kind of anxious to see where the characters go and how more absurd and ridiculous the show gets from here. News out of Japan that Sony has become the second largest company in Japan by market cap. It has reached $153.87 billion in market cap, passing car manufacturer Mitsubishi, which currently sits at $150.07. They got a ways to go to catch Toyota, which is $80 billion ahead of Sony. Probably means they're going to swallow up more companies, doesn't it?
Yeah, probably. That's how they're going to make up that $80 billion. They're going to find $80 billion worth of companies to probably eat, unfortunately. But obviously Sony doing some good things with PlayStation 5 and stuff like that, but obviously the Crunchyroll stuff and other companies, maybe not so much. Not necessarily good news overall. Finally, Mr. Big played the final show of its big finale tour on Tuesday at the Nippon Budokan in Tokyo. The band swears this is going to be the end. Think they stick to it, or do you think we see more Mr. Big down the road?
Yeah, it's hard to say. These guys all seem to be fairly active in other projects and out there still doing it. So while maybe they just don't feel like getting back together, you get the feeling if that mindset ever shifts, they're all going to be still going at it, and there's no reason to not revisit it. And who knows, maybe they can do a song for some new Hellsing project.
Hey, why not? That'd be a lot of fun. And I hope they do, just because that's one of those bands I've always wanted to see and never really got the chance. And incredibly talented band. If you haven't checked out Mr. Big, obviously you may not be able to check them out in person depending on what happens, but definitely go back and check out their catalog. And if you want more music like that, tune in Sunday night for Music Weekly. We talk about some of the best rock and metal. And we'll be doing that again this Sunday night with the music of February the 14th. But that is going to wrap up this edition of the Nerdcast News Report. You're all set for the middle of your week as we go charging toward the weekend as the weather continues to be gorgeous here, which is a nice change. All the snow's melted away. So it just puts everybody in a good mood as we head through the middle of this week. A reminder, we'll be back on Friday with the end-of-week edition of the Nerdcast News Report. We'll be talking about what happens tomorrow at Pokemon Day and what other news items we find between now and then we'll have for you on Friday on the Nerdcast News Report. Big thanks to everyone for joining us. Big thanks to the crew as well. Big thanks to Mike for joining me as well. Big thanks wherever you're listening, wherever you're following us. We really do appreciate that. And that is going to wrap things up. We'll be back again on Friday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.